So any minute now, we should be getting the new Rush Duel ban list drop, which is always a very exciting time. This could potentially really shake up the meta by maybe hitting some of the decks that are seeing a ton of play and maybe are very oppressive, or maybe allowing some of the weaker decks to kind of come to the forefront and show what they can do. So time for some predictions / wish list. I think it's no secret that the strongest deck right now that's also seeing the most play is Seven's Wonder Fusion Turbo. Now, there's a myriad of ways that they could address this problem. The one that I personally would like to see is the banning of Seven's Geas. I still think that if you remove Seven's Geas, the Seven's Wonder Fusion Turbo deck is very strong, but is no longer that I'm going to kill you out of nowhere deck that is unfun to play against, and instead becomes a very high value, very consistent, just strong deck that I think is still very beatable. I think the other more popular opinion is that we should be limiting Seven's Wonder Fusion. This way the turbo build of the deck will be a lot less consistent because you'll only have one card in the deck that gets you to your full combo. The downside being this basically kills Seven's Wonder Fusion as a outside of OTK deck. It no longer will we, I think, see Chariot being used that prominently. We might see a kind of just spellcaster type deck that just incorporates a single copy of Seven's Wonder Fusion just to try and cheat out that fusion monster once every now and then. I think the big reasons I see why people say we shouldn't get rid of Seven's Geas is because one, it is the big bad Seven's boss monster, which is understandable, and the other is that they've never banned a card in Rush Duel thus far. But I think just because it hasn't happened before, or just because of like some anime nostalgia goggles, doesn't mean we shouldn't hit those cards. But again, I do understand, and I think it is probably a lot more likely that we will see Seven's Wonder Fusion take a hit, probably down to a single copy. The only other things I really think you could do to the deck would be limiting Seven's Geas, which doesn't do anything. I think that literally would change nothing. Or you could limit Dragius or Seven's Robe Magician, but both of those options seem terrible, as that has like a knock-on effect that hits a lot of other decks, like just the pure spellcasters, the dark casters, or the dragon decks, Dragon Fusion, all get hit quite badly by that. So I don't think it's worth it when you could just cut the head off the snake and immediately hit the problem cards, being Seven's Geas and Seven's Wonder Fusion. The other annoying cards, I guess, would be the Floodgates, Vanity's Fiend, and Barrier Statue, which again are both already at 1. One is a legend card and one is just limited to 1 copy. With the release of Legend Strike and a little bit with Execute Riding, Barrier Statue spam has become quite prominent. Again, the only way to really fix that is to ban Barrier Statue. So I think I would like to see that card banned, especially since the main reason people say we should keep it around is because it helps deal with Seven's Geas. But if we deal with Seven's Geas, we no longer need to worry about having the out to Seven's Geas. So I think that would be quite healthy for the format. Speaking of Legend Strike, that card is now everywhere. I think it might still be a little bit too early to actually hit the card itself, but I would not be surprised to see Legend Magician take the hit instead, maybe pushing it down to a single copy. That will also hurt Seven's Geas decks, the old Seven's Wonder Fusion, as well as making the Legend Strike a lot less consistent. But again, it feels weird to hit that card when Legend Strike is the problem card, but maybe we'll see Legend Strike go down to 1. The only other cards I can think of that are problematic would be Magic Cylinder, but we are starting to see Magic Cylinder be a little bit less popular just in general, so I think maybe there's no need to hit it. But a lot of people do not like playing against the card, so I can understand the fact that people want it gone. It is very annoying, but again, it is already a legend card and we haven't got any cards banned, so will that actually happen? And the only other card is Dark Lurker. Lurker is a very frustrating card to play against. It has a lot of defense. Recently, we did get the All-Seeing Harvey as kind of a soft counter to that card, but it doesn't always deal with the threat, and Harvey is not always a mainstay in every deck, which means it doesn't always just kind of help to deal with that problem. So I think Dark Lurk is a card which again could potentially get a hit and possibly go down to a single copy. We've also started to see a lot of decks run this as their main primary kind of burn tool in burn type decks like the Earth Machine burn. So maybe we could see a hit finally there. Again, I don't think anything else necessarily needs a hit, but it'll be interesting to see what Konami decide to do. So let's hit refresh and see if the ban list is out, and it looks like it is. And looking at this image that we have for the thumbnail for it, it's looking like Seven's Wonder Fusion might get hit. So let's click on in and see what's up. So we can immediately see there are no cards banned, which is fine. I mean, again, it would have been nice to see the barrier statue, who is obviously peeking his head up down here, get hit. And it would have been nice to see Seven's Gears get hit, but I think that probably almost guarantees we're going to see Seven's Wonder Fusion go down to 2. So if we go down to the restricted cards, we can see Lilius is still at 1. I think that is very, very important. I would really like to not see Execute come back in full force. We've already started to see it performing a lot better than it has been recently. So I'm happy that this is still at 1. Barrier Statue, again, can only really go to banned or 1, so it's staying there. Let's see what else is next. Then no change to Necromade Nana or Tiger Roll. Again, this is fine, I think. A lot of people would like to see these cards unhit, but these cards were used in like infinite loop or very long looping decks, which could work to try and like OTK your opponent or take very long turns, so I can understand why you don't want to unhit those. Next up, Thunderbolt and Magical Stone Excavation. So again, these are cards I think a lot of people would like to see unhit. I think Thunderbolt will probably have to just stay on here forever, just because anytime any good level 7s get printed, it's just an indirect buff to him. And Wonderbolt is still a decent deck. I don't think it's as good as the 7's Wonder Fusion Turbo, but still decent. And again, I don't think we could ever unhit Magical Stone Excavation, because again, if you're ever running more than 1, it's probably because you're trying to do something very unfair with it. And then, oh, that isn't, I was wondering if they were going to. So, Sea Serpents is a decent deck, but it hasn't been putting up a lot of results. I think that's the key takeaway. It does put up results. It doesn't put up a ton of results. But on top of Sea Serpents, there's also the Pure Glass aggro build, which just plays Pure Glass Spears and a couple of copies of Grand Extreme to just kind of cheat it out. I think this is trying to perhaps dissuade that, and also is a bit of a hit to the Sea Serpent mid-range build in general, because that deck is very, very strong. So I didn't actually think this was going to get hit, but I'm glad it did. Interestingly, we've come to the end of the limited and there's no 7's Wonder Fusion. So is it going down to 2 copies? Because that's very strange. So Grand Extreme was a good anti-7's Wonder Fusion card because it can mess with your opponent's graveyard. But if 7's Wonder Fusion is only at 2, that now means you are nerfing it down to 2 copies, but then will also be buffing it by getting rid of a lot of the cards that hate it. So that's interesting. All right, semi-limited, here we go. So Progress Putter, we've got the Secret Order, again, that's fine. And then, yep, we've got the Executee Scramble still at 2, and then 7's Wonder Fusion at 2. I don't like this, to be honest. I think at 2, people are still going to try and make this work. And it's still going to work some of the time. Now that it's at 2, it's going to just feel worse when you lose to this, because it just means your opponent got luckier. Your opponent just found one of the 2-ofs instead of one of the 3-ofs and blew you out of the game, and there's nothing you can do. I think down to 1, there's no real argument for trying to play it as a consistent 7's Wonder Fusion Turbo deck. You could just kind of play it as a, oh, well, if this comes off, this is great, but my whole deck isn't just this one thing. I think at 2, you can still play this and have it be a functioning deck. Again, now it's just going to feel really gross when you lose to it, because you're going to be like, oh, well, you've only had 2 copies, you have to find one of the 2. And with the Grand Extreme hit as well, that means now at least that one deck now has less tools to deal with it. I am not a fan of this. I think it's like a slap on the wrist. Right, to be fair, this might stop 7's Wonder Fusion Turbo. This might just kill it. But I don't think it's going to stop people from playing it, and I think people that are playing it are now going to get a little bit more frustrated because their deck's now a little bit less consistent, and people that play against it, again, are going to feel like, oh, my opponent just got lucky and found one of the 2 copies of this card and then ended me out of nowhere. So, I really would have liked this down to 1, because then I feel like it's a lot more prominent in what we're doing here. I'm not a fan of this. And then the other thing is we didn't hit any of the floodgates. I would, again, still really like to see Barrier Statue gone. We didn't hit Lurker, so that's still going to be in full force, which, again, is seeing more play now than ever. Yeah, I don't think this is a winner of a list. I mean, I'll be happy to be proven wrong in the future. Maybe 7's Wonder Fusion Turbo does just drop off the face of the earth with this change, and then I guess I'll be happier, but I don't know. I think overall, not a fan. But thanks for watching, and we'll see what happens with the meta going forward.